This is the first of a set of workshops we're going to be doing with CodeUp, effectively to help you build a website. Okay, so as I mentioned, today is going to be the first session. I'm going to give you some concepts, and then over the next few sessions, we're going to be building together these, your own website. We're going to start with HTML and CSS. Before I start with that, let me do a quick round of introductions so everybody knows where they are. We are CodeUp. CodeUp is a coding school. Our mission is to share knowledge, and we specifically are focused on the community for women, non-transgender, transgender and non-conforming people. And so we try to create an environment where people can learn and effectively, be as excited as we are with knowledge, with programming, with data analytics, with product management, just as much as we are. We've been around for quite some time now, and one of our commitments is to share knowledge with the community, and that's what we're doing. These workshops and these webinars together. About myself, my name is Roger. I was born in Barcelona, but in university I left. I went overseas, and over the last 12 years or so, I've been across England, Canada, Australia, and India as well, working largely on software development. So I've been part of software development, product owner, and so on. But I want to say something really clear to all of you. I do not have a computer science background, and in spite of that, I can code. I say that because I know that when we want to all try building our websites and so on, it might sound a bit daunting. It might sound like coding is very difficult, but trust me, it's easy, it's within your reach, and hopefully together we're going to be able to put you in a position where you can start coding on your own. Okay, I'm going to let Ruth introduce herself.
Hi everybody, so yeah, my name is Ruth and I work at CodeUp as the campus manager, and so basically part of my job is to help people that are interested in getting into tech and transitioning into tech. I'm just kind of there the whole part of the journey, supporting you from the beginning to the end. And so yeah, like Roger said, these workshops are kind of just to give you a little bit of a taster of what it's like, and as you said there, you don't have to come from a computer science background. This is proof that there is you can get into it from different areas. Also, I'm very sorry about the background noise. I've had an internet issue today, so I've had to do some last minute problem solving. So I'm going to turn my camera off and turn my mic off. But like, anyone's got any questions about CodeUp or anything, feel free to put them in the chat, and I can answer you there.
Cool. So that's that. Now, from now, we're going to do a session that is going to be very, very hands-on. Now, if there's any questions on any of the concepts that I put across, just drop a note on Zoom. I trust you all know how to use Zoom. There's just a chat. Just feel free to drop a note there, and we can address some of those questions as we go. And then at the end, we'll have a block for questions where we will be able to effectively spend some time, on answering any further questions and so on. Okay. So just so you know, the chat is there, we're ready to go. Okay. Now, first things first, just to manage expectations, as I mentioned here today, I want to give you some of the tools that you will require to start building your website. Obviously, building a website is a bit of an involved process. So as you can guess, I will not be able to teach you everything in just of an hour. But what we'll do is I'll give you some foundation and some key concepts that then you can go and practice. We're going to record that session, and I think Ruth is going to share it with you after. And so then you can always fall back to this video. So feel free to try to do the instructions as with me, but if you can't, don't worry about it, because you're going to have this video with you. So I would suggest for you to try to ground these concepts, make sure you understand it. And then as you watch the video later, you can just start using it as your reference and continue building from there. Okay, as you want. I'll try to explain it slowly so you can do it with me, but if not, you always have the video. Okay. All right. So let's get started. We're talking websites, and we talk HTML and CSS and JavaScript and whatnot. Let's step back for a second. Let's understand what happens when you access a website. Before I do that, I'm keen to know what project would you like to build building with your coding skills. So comment in the chat. I'm keen to know what sort of projects do you have in your mind. Do you want to build, I don't know, newspaper, a blog? Do you want to build your own website, a portfolio? Just drop a note on your chat. Keen to know what are your projects and what is that you are actually trying to build with your coding skills. That would be super cool for me to know. Now, whilst you do so, let's get going with understanding what happens when you build a website, okay? Excuse me, when you access a website. So every single person in this Zoom call, but also everybody who uses the computer has an application called a web browser, okay? Now a web browser, the famous names are Chrome, Safari, Firefox, but also Vivaldi, Opera, Brave, Internet Explorer, all of those are applications that are called a web browser. Now, a web browser, what a web browser does when you go to google.com is a web browser goes to someone's computer, that's called a server, someone's computer, and then takes a file from that computer and then reads the instructions on that file, okay? And then the browser takes those instructions and shows you the website that you're building, that you see on the screen. So again, your browser just goes to someone's computer, say for example in the United States, that computer has a file, okay? And then what they do is the browser takes that file, reads it, and with a set of instructions, shows you the website, interprets the website, and shows you what you see on the screen, okay? Now, these instructions are effectively in 3 ways, okay? The first set of instructions that the browser reads are what called HTML, which is what we're gonna talk about today, right? Now, HTML, it's initials for Hypertext Markup Language. It's effectively a programming language that defines the content and the layout, right? So I think someone in the chat commented that she wanted to build a blog. So HTML for a blog or for any website, what it would do is it would define the content and the layout. That is, HTML helps you to put the title, the image, and the text, and effectively allows you to define if you want the text to be below the image, or if you want the paragraph, or if you want 2 columns instead of 1, or if you want to put 2 images. HTML helps you annotate or show in your screen effectively the images, the content of your website, and effectively the structure, how you dispose, what's the disposition, what's the layout, what's the composition, okay? So HTML focuses on content and layout, okay? So the browser reads those instructions in HTML and then shows you the website with the content and the layout that the programmer, the web developer, has defined, okay? In addition to those instructions, there's also CSS, okay? CSS is another set of instructions that the browser reads, interprets it, and leverages to show your website. Now, what happens is that when you have your content and your layout, that's just dull. It's plain content and plain layout. There's no design to it. So what CSS does is it helps you with the presentation, with the design, right? So what does CSS do? Things like the colors, things like the size of the font, the margins, the space in between the lines. So when you write a Microsoft, if you use any text processor like Microsoft Word, for example, and you do all of the bold, underline, italics, highlighting text, all of that customization, all of that presentation is what CSS does. So CSS instructions are complementing HTML. Okay, so HTML is a set of instructions that the browser reads for content and layout. CSS is another set of instructions different to HTML that focus on presentation. And lastly, there's JavaScript, which is a programming language that is picking up a lot of popularity over the recent years. Now, JavaScript's main word is interaction. So anything that the user, the person who reads the website and the website, any interactions between these 2 parties is largely mediated by JavaScript. Example, when you shop online and you add a product onto a basket, that's mediated with JavaScript. When you're in a website and go from section A to section B of that website, that's thanks to JavaScript. When you're in a website and you submit a form, for example, contact us, and then you put your details and send submit, you send a message, that's mediated with JavaScript as well, all right? So JavaScript focuses on interaction, pop-ups, any forms that, any messages that appear, all of these things are interaction, that is things that happen between the user and the website, and that's JavaScript's realm, that's its territory, okay? So HTML layout, CSS presentation, JavaScript interaction. We're gonna be talking today about the first 2, right? And then in the next workshops, we're gonna be talking more about JavaScript, okay? Any questions on this? If there are, just drop a message. I hope it's clear. For now, don't worry too much if it doesn't make 100% sense. Just understand that there's 3 sets of instructions that the browser reads, that they have different purposes. And we're gonna explore now in more detail HTML and CSS, okay? All right, so if there's any questions, let me know. If not, we'll carry on. All right, so let's talk about HTML. All right, that's what we're here for. Rock and roll. So what's HTML? All right, first the boring definition. It's a markup language to annotate text, blah, 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 blah. Right. Now, in short, what HTML does is, as we mentioned earlier, the words that you see here, annotate, text, images, and other content for display in a web browser. So instead of annotate, think of put, draw, include, embed, whatever of these words work. That is, HTML is the actual language you're going to use to effectively include, show the content that you want. So if you've got a title, you're going to type the title there, right? If you've got an image, you're going to put that image there, right? And that's the vehicle to do that. The platform to do so is HTML, all right? And then the browser is going to display that, all right? Now you say, hey, Roger, how do I actually put content in HTML? Okay. We're going to see later where do we put it, but in an HTML file, which we'll talk about that later, you would typically use HTML language, right? Remember that you're talking to a browser, all right? And the browser needs to follow the instructions that you give it to it, right? Assume that the browser is stupid. You need to give exactly the instructions that you want. So how do I give instructions to the browser? Through HTML. In HTML, the golden rule and the key principle is what's called HTML tags, right? Now, a tag is nothing but a letter between those two arrows that you see, right? And there's a series of tags, right? Now, this tag, what it gives the browser is a heads up that you're going to be putting an element there, right? Now, that's called an opening tag, right? P is it just comes with HTML. There's a lot of tags. We'll show you a few. Let's just take P for now. So you have the opening tag and then you need to close it. All right. So the golden rule for HTML is you need to use these tags, and every time you open it, you make sure you close it. Simple, right? Know that in the closing tag, you need to put that slash. Just make sure that's the case, right? Because then HTML knows that you're creating a P. Now, what's a P? In the world of HTML, a P is a paragraph. That means you're going to be putting text here, right? So then you would put the actual content here. What you put in between these tags is exactly what you would type, for example, when you type on WhatsApp or on email. So exactly you would just type there. That's just free text, right? And then HTML would take that and assume that that's a paragraph, right? Because you've given me the tag of a paragraph, all right? Now, these tags and the content together, all of that is what's called an HTML element, all right? So all of this constitutes an element on HTML, right? Again, P is a paragraph. There's many more types of tags. We'll talk more later, but just so you understand, so you grant the concept for now, okay? Easy peasy for now. If there are any questions, let me know. I don't know if there's anyone else that is not, I see some background. Anyway, I don't know if there's any questions. Anyway, I'll keep going. So that's the HTML tag. Now, how do we make HTML elements unique? That is, an HTML tag, you're going to have 50 paragraphs, right? If you build a blog or if you build a newspaper, you're going to have a lot of paragraphs, a lot of images. You're going to need to create what's called an HTML attribute. Don't worry, we're going to see how HTML attributes help us later. But for now, just to understand that an attribute is a way to target a specific HTML. So remember that the paragraph we had earlier, it's just an anonymous tag, right? What you need to do is to be able to target it. You need to put a name to it, right? You'll see why in a second. Just bear with me for now. Now, the way you do this, here I've got a paragraph. I purposely left a lot of space here. So you see between the P and this arrow, I left a lot of space. Because here's what I'm going to include, an attribute. Now, class is a type of attribute. It's a way of saying, I want this paragraph to be part of a group of paragraphs called fruits. Now, what I put in between, not that I'm putting the double quotes, is just the name of the group. So think of it as a way of grouping these elements, right? Now, class, again, is just for you to understand that this paragraph belongs to the group of class fruits, right? So that's a paragraph. And what you place here is what's called the attribute. Okay, again, just for the purposes of being able to put a name to that paragraph. All right. Now you can have two paragraphs that have the same class. That's not a problem. All right. So you would have two paragraphs and both of them are of the class fruits. Okay, just so you group them logically. Right. Now class can be used multiple times, but what if you want to have an attribute just for one element? Okay, the way to do so is what's called ID. Right. So know that instead of putting class, I'm putting ID. Then the equal symbol, right? And then double string and then favorite I'm writing here, right? So all of these are 3 paragraphs that I have on my HTML, 2 of them out of the fruits class, and 1 of them out of the favorite ID, right? That's also the attribute, okay? We're gonna see why that is important, but just important that we bear this in mind, okay? If there's any questions, just let me know. I promise you I'm almost done with theory, so. Okay? All right, so now we create elements. We know how to group them. Now, what happens is that as you build your website, you're going to have a lot of HTML components, right? You're going to have a lot of HTML elements, right? So what you want to do is you want to logically group them, right? You need to have the information structure. It's bad practice, and now that you're studying HTML, it's bad practice to have HTML elements floating in the space, right? So you need to make sure you put them in logical containers. Now, how do I put it in a container? With what's called a division, right? So containers don't only group things, they don't do anything. They don't have an HTML effect as such, right? But what they do is they help you group things and effectively make nesting. Nesting means that you put all those elements inside a container. Now, how do we do a container in HTML? With a division, right? So what we do is another HTML tag that you see here, which is div, right? Think of it as division, right? Now, all of these elements right now are in my division, and divisions, divs are effectively the building blocks of a website, right? When you build a website, you're always gonna have divs as the building blocks, and then you put stuff inside. Paragraphs, image, text, whatever you want, okay? And we're gonna see some examples later in a practical exercise, all right? Now, just like pretty much everything in HTML, I've got the div as normal, right? Make sure you close it. Note at the bottom left that I'm putting also that slash to make sure I'm closing the div. But just like we did with the paragraphs, I'm going to put a class, right? So instead of having a div just like this, I'm going to put a class just to make sure I understand it and I can logically divide information. And the class name is shopping basket, all right? So with that, I've got all the information grouped logically, all right? Any questions thus far? If there are, just drop a note on the chat, okay? All right, so that's some of the concepts I wanted to practice, to explain to you. Let's do some HTML now, and let's just get our hands dirty with code, shall we? So to build HTML, what I'm gonna be using here is a website called CodePen, right? Now, what CodePen does is it creates a platform that allows you to effectively write your code and see the combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So remember earlier that we talked about how a website is the result of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So CodePen creates an interface, a platform that allows you to code, right? And here I would put my HTML, right? Here I would put my CSS in the middle in this window, and then JavaScript would go here. Now, the combination of these 3 would result in this website that I see at the bottom, right? So these are just windows. I can just resize them as I see fit, and then I can just make that bigger, right? Obviously, now this is my website. It's blank because there's no code in it, as you can see, right? Now, I would strongly recommend for you to use CodePen. It's free, and we're not affiliated with it. Feel free to use any other playgrounds, but it's just, it helps you when it comes to start learning, right? Now, just so you know, when you start, if you create your account, you will not see this button run, which I'll explain why, what it does. If you don't see it, just go to settings and then behavior. You just should be changing that, okay? So you can take a look after. Now, here I'm actually gonna do it, so, right. So that's why you should see the run button. Cool. Now I see. Okay. Cool. Now, what does this run button do? CodePen does not do anything until you tell it so. So here I can write whatever HTML I want. That as I click run, CodePen is not going to do anything. So when I tap code, CodePen doesn't know. I need to tell it, hey, CodePen, I've written some code. Go ahead and execute it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this windows. Is there any questions? I don't know if I hear any questions. No? Okay. Cool. So here I'm going to tap my HTML. Now let's go ahead and do HTML. As we saw earlier, we can put some text here. So to do so, I'm going to create a P, right? That's just a paragraph, right? And I'm doing it with the closing tag, right? So remember I'm putting that slash here. And I imagine I want to create a coffee shop. So I'm going to call it Roger's Coffee Shop, right? So as you see, I'm just typing free text as I normally would. I have the piece, so that is that's in between the text wrapped around these tags, right? If I click run, what you'll see at the bottom is the result of my code, and that is that text here at the bottom, right? So what this is doing is HTML just spitting a paragraph with text. Okay, so far so good, right? Now, once I've got this, let's say I want to talk a bit about my the story about my coffee shop, right? So I'm going to create another P, right? Again with the dash, and here I'm going to write a bit about my coffee shop. Now, instead of typing it here, I'm just going to copy this because I've got it saved. So I'm going to paste a lot of text here, right? That's just about my coffee shop, right? And then again, I can just run it, and I've got two elements, one paragraph and another, right? Now remember that now I have two anonymous paragraphs, so that's not really what we want. What I want to make sure is I can identify those, right? So to do so, note that I'm creating the space in between the arrow and the P. I'm going to create a class, right? Class, the equal symbol, what in mathematics would be equal, and then double string. So 1 and 2, right? If you type in CodePen 1, the string, the quote, it will automatically create 2. So just makes it easier, but just make sure that's true. All right. And here I'm going to call it, let's say biography or story, right? Or coffee or shop story, right? So that's the story about my coffee shop, right? When I created it and so on, right? Now that's that. Now this is not looking too sexy just yet. But what we're going to do is we're going to start putting more content, some more content in. Now, something we will want to put is actually a title, right? The way for you to create titles in HTML, you do what's called an H1, okay? H1, so again, same story. You use the brackets, and then you use this dash here, right? So just this here. And then here we're going to actually put Roger's Coffee Shop, just so it's a title. We're going to remove this in a second. But just so you see, an H1 creates a title, right? As you see here, now I've got a title. Now, what H? H is obviously short for headline. 1, it refers to the biggest title, right? So a title in itself. If you want to create a subtitle, then what you can do is an H2. So instead of having a P here, I'm going to have an H2, right? So H2. And then as you see, this is going to create a subtitle, right? So I've got title, subtitle, and then a paragraph. Now I'm going to put, instead of Roger's Coffee Shop, I'm going to put a very nice coffee shop, a very nice place to be. All right. So now I've got effectively some information about my website. Okay. Now, as we saw earlier, we should be adding more elements, obviously, but we need to start organizing our information. So to do so, we want to put them in containers. We've also seen that with the divs, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div, right? So div, right? Now, everything in between the tags is effectively what's going to be, what's going to be inside that container. So here, I'm effectively, whatever is between those two tags is what's going to be in that container. So what I need to do is I need to remove this and put it below, right? So now this paragraph is inside this division, this container, right? I'm going to put a class to it, and we're going to call it the story section, right? So just to divide the section. So we've got information about our coffee shop, and we know it's the section, right? Or about, let's just put it about. So that's about our coffee shop. All right. Now, now we've got this information. Let's also add, for example, let's say another paragraph with the business hours. So we can just put business hours, and let's just say 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Saturday. Okay, just for example. So now I've got, so you see I've got 2 P's inside my container. Now you should see, you'll see that as you add elements, it's going to be a bit hard to read, to remember what you've got inside your container. So what you can do is you can just do with a tab section. This can just move a bit inwards. That's called indentation, right? And that's just going to help you see what's inside your div, right? Also, CodePen shows you this arrow here. If I click on it, it shows you, it minimizes everything that is in about section. So if you've got a very long block of code, you can effectively summarize, just sort of string them a bit so you can continue working on other sections. Okay, nice. Now let's have something else. A coffee shop has a menu. So let's create a menu here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another section, right? and you guessed it, it's going to be called menu section, right? So first things first, and then inside I'm going to be creating a list of items, right? Now I'm not going to be using paragraphs because paragraph is for full text, but what we want is to actually create a list of items, right? Now, how do I create a list of items in HTML? Through the use of another tag called UL, an ordered list, okay? So UL, right? Opening tag and closing tag, right? Now, UL stands for an ordered list, okay? So that's where the list comes, that the tag name comes from, right? Now, what this is saying HTML is, HTML heads up, this is gonna be a list of line items. I'm gonna include a list of items, okay? So this is gonna be a set of line items. Now, HTML doesn't know how many do you want or what's a line item, right? You're talking to a machine. So what HTML says is, listen, create a UL that's gonna be, I'm gonna be creating a list of items, but you need to tell me what every single line item is, right? To do so, you create another tag that only is to be used inside a UL called a LI. That is a line item, right? So again, I'm gonna close this, and here I'm gonna write, for example, latte coffee, for example, right? I'm gonna close this tag, right? Before we press on, let me just show you how that looks like. So here, if I scroll down, you see I've got the latte coffee here in the middle, right? Now a UL is an invisible tag in that it doesn't do anything visually, but it does create that section, right? So let's add a few more items. LI, let's just call green tea. And then a third one to be, there's also a croissant, for example. Oops, should I make a typo? And all right, so I've got 1, 2, and 3. Know that I'm just with the tab, I'm only indexing it, right? Just so it's inside, so I can see better what I've got in my code. All right. So now I've got these 3 items here. Actually, sorry. Right now, I've got this section and I've got the unordered list here. Now you'll say, Roger, if there's an unordered list, is there an ordered list? The answer is yes. You can replace this with OL, and CodePen will automatically change this for you in the closing tag. And then what you're going to see is a 1, 2, 3 instead, right? So instead of giving you these bullet points, it's just going to be 1, 2, 3. Okay. In my case, I'm going to leave it with UL because I think bullet points are cool. So we're just going to leave it like that. And then let's put a title section here. So to do so, we know now how to do is with the H2, right? With the headline 2, and we're going to call our special menu, right? Note that I'm putting this title subtitle, excuse me, inside the menu section. So I've got the information all organized, right? So effectively, all of this is in the menu section. And then all of this is in the about section, right? And then I've got these 2 titles at the top, which if you think of it, I could also create a div, right? To put these 2 elements, right? And then just call it, for example, class. It's going to be title section. Okay, just so I have every single element organized in building blocks. Okay, any questions this far? If there are, just drop a text, just drop a note on the chat. Okay, okay. Now you say, Roger, this is very good and everything, but how many websites have only text? Right? None. All websites have images and have videos. So let's actually put some images. Now, in the about section, I want to create here a space for me to put an image in it, right? So the first thing I'm going to do to make sure everything is logically divided is I'm going to create a subsection inside called image. It's going to be called image section. Okay. So image section is pretty self-explanatory. It's just a subsection of a container inside a container, and here's where I'm going to place the image. Now, earlier I mentioned that there was one golden rule in HTML, which is that every opening tag has to have a matching closing tag, right? There are one exception, and that is images. Images are always a bit picky. Now, how do you create an image? How do you create an element in HTML? Now you know it, you do it with a tag, with a specific HTML tag. Now, the specific HTML tag for image is IMG. And note that it doesn't have any closing tag. That's it. That's the image, okay? It stands, with this, it can stand on its own feet, right? So no dashes, no symbols, just the 2 arrows and img, short for image. Okay. With that, HTML knows that you're going to be placing an image here. Okay, and then it's going to be preparing to just get the image there. Now, what's the question? This begs the question, which is, okay, but what's the image, right? For us to do so, we need to inside, just like we were doing with attributes earlier. Remember that we were putting a class. We need to put an attribute called source. That's SRC, okay, short for source, right? And it works exactly like classes in terms of the nomenclature you need to use. So just do equal and then 2 double strings, double quote, okay? Now, source is effectively going to be pointing to an image, right? So what we need now is something that points to an image, right? The way you would do this typically when you build websites is you're going to have your own images. And when you get more into more advanced development, you're going to be able to effectively load images of your own and effectively make your HTML point to those images, that is, show those images, right? For the time being, just to practice, let's use an image in the public space. So if you go to a website called Google, that I don't have to tell you about it, you just go to coffee shop, right? In my instance, then you go to image section. And then that's effectively what you would see, right? That's the image that you would see, right? Let's say, for example, I just pick that image. If I right click on that image, I'll see an option that says copy image address, right? If I click there and I open a new tab and then I paste here, right? I see that there's a link. If I go to it, what I see is not a website, it's just the image, right? Now that's the address of the image. That is, in the world of web development, images are stored somewhere. So are effectively stored in an environment, right? In a server or something. And so that's the address. That's just the address for you to go specifically to the image, right? This link is used in turning a website that is pointing to that image. So we're just going to be using that for now. Okay. So what I need to put here is effectively the same address that I pasted earlier. So I'm just going to do it one more time. I open any image that you want. So I'm just going to be opening this one. Copy image address that copies this link. So if I delete here, you see if I paste, I just see that link there. And then that's effectively what I place in between those strings. Those quotes symbols. All right. Now, if I load that now, then what you will see is that HTML is effectively embedding that image, right? So all of a sudden I've got that image here, right? Now, one word about this. This is not how you would do it. That is, you would not be using third-party images. I'm doing it here just for the purpose of showing it to you. If you build your website, just be mindful that some images have copyright, right? So make sure that you use images that you own, or make sure that you use images that have non-commercial repurpose rights, copyleft, Creative Commons rights, and so on. Okay, so just be mindful of that, of using copyrighted content. Okay, I'm just using it here for the purpose of showing it to you. Okay. So now we've got this image embedded here. That's really cool. It looks really big, but we'll get to that later. So for now, we've got the image embedded. Love it. Now, what else is also very, very common in websites? Obviously, videos, right? So what if we could actually add a video here? So let's create another section here at the bottom called video section. I think there's a question from Eva. Where do I upload the image to get our URL? So to do so, you're going to need to create some sort of a hosting. So it's effectively, think of it as like a Dropbox without getting into too technical details, like a Dropbox, like a cloud environment where you can load your images, and then those services can give you effectively the URL that you can use, right? So it's just online cloud storage, right, that you would use. It's a bit more technical than that, but just to put it very simply, you would upload it there, and then that gives you the links. I can send you some links after if you want, and some options that you can use. So the source, excuse me, not the source. The class is going to be video section, okay? And then I need to close that, right? Whoops. Right. So now I've got this here. No problem. Now, how do I put a video here? Now, putting videos in web development is easy. It can, if you want to, depends on how you do it. Now, an easy way for us to do it is with using a specific type of HTML tag called an iframe, right? An iframe is outside of the scope of this workshop to explain, for me to explain to you what an iframe is, a bit more complicated. But let me just show you a very easy way for you to embed a video. if you go to YouTube, right, and you just type anything, obviously, I opened this video that I was looking at earlier, right? There's an option called share, right? So here I can put it on Twitter, Blogger, right, on how to embed it. Now there's an option here that is a bit mysterious that is just called embed, right? So if I just click on this, it gives me this preview and it gives me some text here that it might look gibberish. If I select on it and I click copy, right, and I paste this here, now all of a sudden that gibberish, it looks actually somewhat familiar, doesn't it? That's HTML. So as you see here, that's an iframe that is opening, right, all the way here, and then a closing tag, right? So if you see here, all what is in here is just attributes, right? So you see iframe, the opening tag, and then the closing tag, and all of that are just simply attributes that's got inside. Okay, so with that iframe, just pasting it like this, you can embed videos on YouTube effectively on your website. Now don't take my word for it, but just have a look at what that looks like. So I've got my image, and then I've got my video here embedded, right? If I click on it, it will just reproduce it. So exactly as it would behave in on YouTube, right? It's just a way of embedding the content that is showing a video, showing material that is stored elsewhere. All right. Any questions thus far? If there are any questions, just let me know. Okay. Cool. So now we've got a bit of a section, a website build, but it looks a bit sad, doesn't it? You say, Roger, this is good, but you know that looks very, very plain. There's no design to it. Now, to do so, we're not going to be using HTML. Remember, we've got a specific set of instructions to give some color, literally, to our website, and that set of instructions is with CSS. So let's go back to the slides. We'll come back here in a second, right, to our code. So now that we've got our HTML, it's time for us to put some design to it, right? To do so, we're going to be doing it with CSS, as we saw earlier, right? Now, what CSS is a language, style sheet language, that is effectively, as we saw earlier, aimed at change the presentation of an HTML document, right? So CSS remit, what CSS is best for, is just for presentation, right? So CSS, you need to learn it if you want to make your websites to look somewhat professional and to effectively imprint on them your own design. Okay. Now, how do we give CSS instructions? How do we make those instructions understood to the web browser? Remember, you're talking to a web browser, which is a very stupid machine. It doesn't know anything. You need to give exact instructions, and you have to assume very little when talking to browsers. Okay. They're extremely powerful, but they need very specific instructions. So how do you give CSS instructions, right? Remember earlier that we saw, the tags that we saw earlier with the attributes and so on. Now here is where you'll see that the attribute comes in really relevant. So what you see here is a p tag with a text originator in the class fruits, right? So that fruits, remember that, because that's the attribute, and that's what's called at the same time, it's what's called a CSS selector. So these attributes in CSS, all what I do is I write it like so. So in CSS, I do dot fruits. That is CSS. I want to do something with the class fruits, right? The dot defines that is a class, right? So it means that an HTML class, right? Then this is telling CSS, I want to do something with the elements that have this class, right? Then to expand on it, that's the element selector. To expand on it, you put these two curly braces, right? So remember, opening and closing the curly brace, right? This is whatever is inside these two curly braces is effectively what I'm going to be doing with the elements with a class name fruits. Okay. Now CSS, what I can put here is a list of instructions. These instructions, there's a whole list of instructions that you can follow with CSS. I'll send you a link after. But an example of that is what's called a CSS property with the color. So if I just type color, then colon, and then I just put any element in it, then in this case green, and then semicolon, that's telling CSS to change the text color. When we write color, it refers to the color of the text of all elements with a class name fruits, and change that color to green. All right, and then semicolon. All right, let's have a look at someone like that. So what you see on the left hand side is effectively the name of the property, and what's on the right hand side is effectively what property needs to be like, right? So what do you expect for CSS to do? Okay, let's have a look at some other examples. Styling HTML here, top left, the one we just saw. So again, to recap, color is a given. So you don't have to, this is just a set, there's a set of CSS properties. So there's color, and I'll show you a few others now. And then color, and then the right-hand side, effectively, whatever we want that color to be. Some others are background color. Okay, so this is changing, as the name explains, you know, as if you were highlighting almost like just the background of that element. We're changing it to blue, right? And note here that instead of using a dot, I'm using a hashtag. That's to refer to ID. Remember earlier that we talked about class being multiple, so you can name multiple elements with class, but IDs are unique. Only one element can be can have a single ID, right? And so to target an ID, you would use this hashtag. Okay. Now some other examples: font size, right? And color again. Font size is 26. PX is just pixels. So when you are in Microsoft Word or Google Docs or any of these, you know, you change the font size to 12, 14, and so on. That's just pixels. So PX is just for pixels. If you don't know what that is, think of it as centimeters or inches. It's just a measure. It's just a yardstick. So the higher the number, the bigger is the font and the way around. All right. So with that, we're defining the size of the text, right, as well as the color. Now here, note I'm using, instead of a class or an ID, I'm using an element, an attribute, a type of element, right? I'm using P. What this is doing is asking CSS to change the font size and the text color of all the paragraphs, right? Regardless of the class and regardless of the ID. Okay. And one more. If I want to apply a specific style to multiple elements, what I can do is H1, which, just you remember, is titles, comma P. That's doing, what this is doing is implementing this style to all H1s and to all Ps, right? So I don't have to write it twice, okay? And here what I'm doing is font family. So I'm just changing the type of text. So Times New Roman or Arial and so on, right? So these are some examples of some of the CSS properties. Again, color, background color, font family, font size. These are things that you will remember as you continue to develop in your journey in development. There's dozens and dozens of CSS properties. I'll send you a link later, which you can see the full list, and effectively, don't worry about remembering those. You will remember the most evident ones, but as you work in development, you will typically have also a bit of a cheat sheet, so you don't have to know everyone by heart, right? You just know the basic ones, and then you can always consult documentation, so you know a bit what they do. Okay, so let's do some CSS. Now that we know this, let's come back to our project. We left it here with you know, our image and so on. So here's where we put HTML. Remember, what I can do now is resize this. You'll see that this changes a bit the length. It doesn't affect. It's just the preview. So nothing to worry about. So here, let's go ahead and start changing, applying CSS, shall we? First things first. I've got a title section. So, and I've got two paragraphs here. So what I want is for the H1 and the H2, right? Curly braces, right? And here what I'm going to write is effectively what we saw earlier here, right? So I'm going to put font family, and I'm going to make it Arial, right? Know that I'm putting that colon and then semicolon, right? If I run this, you'll see that this text should effectively change to a different type of font, okay? That's easy. Let's also do it for the paragraphs, because we have a lot of paragraphs as well. And also, we're going to change as well the list as well, right? Actually, one thing you can do, if you want to target everything, is not good practice, but you can also do is put an asterisk. If you target an asterisk, what you do is you target everything. So with this, if I just remove that, with the asterisk, you're telling every single element in my HTML website, I want it to have this font. You can also do that, right? Avoid it because you want to make sure you have control, and having the asterisk overrides, that is, changes everything, right? So just try to avoid using it, all right? Now, I could do more things. Let's say for that title section, okay, imagine I want the title section. So to target a class, right, it's a class, so I need to use the dot, right, curly braces, and what I'm going to do is the background color to be blue, for example, right? Now, what this is, you're going to see now the result, and now I've got this background, okay? Now, color, I think, is with the American spelling, that is OR, I don't think it works with the British spelling with the OUR, but I don't think it works. So I'll leave it for now. Maybe it does work in depending on what you use it, but I think for the most part you're going to be using the American spelling. But then you kind of read that, and then what I can do here is color to be, for example, white, right? Now, don't judge me on my design skills, so I'll let you do your own design, but just so you know how we can change it, right? Now, one thing you want to know as web developers, as web developers, is that you don't always need to write a number, right? What you could do is, instead of typing numbers, you just put a hex color, right? Now, a hex color for those on background with design background is a code that effectively defines a unique color, right? So what you see here is lots and lots of colors, right? So instead of writing here blue, what I can change that with is one of these codes. So for example, imagine I want to this color. So it starts with a hashtag. I copy that, I paste it here, and instead of having blue, I can be much more specific and have effectively the color that I want, right? So use some hex colors, just Google hex colors, and you'll find here dozens and dozens of colors. And in fact, if you click here, you'll see associated colors, right? So you'll have an entire scale. That's very good if you want to build a website from scratch and you want to know what are complementary colors. These are all complementary colors. So you could have different sections with different shades and so on. It gives you a lot of control as to how your website looks like. It's a very cool resource, right? So now we've got this. What's the problem we have? Well, we have this huge image, right? And it's huge, so we need to do something with that. Now, how do we target an element? Remember, we can do it with a class name, an ID, but also just typing the element. Now, because we only have one image, that makes sense. But remember that if you use these, it will target all your images, right? So just be mindful of that. Okay. So here, what I can do is I can create, can type width. That is the horizontal space, right? I can put a specific pixel, right? So we can just do 100 pixels, for example. What happens with that is that that's going to force the image to have a specific size, right? So it's a bit tedious in that you need to be changing and being careful with that. I can do that as well, right? 600 pixels, right? It will automatically resize, so your image is not squashed, right? You can also do height, right? And do it, for example, 400 pixels. The problem with that is that then you might start squashing the image, right? Because you're forcing the image to be such width and such height. So just be mindful of these things, right? What you can also do is 100%. I don't know if there's a question. How do you, Mika, I'm just bringing the question, how do you tag in CSS for different images? Yeah, so what you would do is you would name your image. So in the image, it's got a source, right? So see, I've got a source here. By the way, that doesn't change anything in HTML. If you create an entry space, it just, if it helps you read it, just do it, okay? So that's the image. Then what we do is a class, or let's put in an ID, for example, so it's unique, and we're gonna do it, we're gonna call it shop, don't know, image, for example, right? So then we just copy this, and instead of doing this, what we're gonna do is hashtag, because we're targeting an ID, remember, right? And then just followed by this. And with that, if you've got two images, then each image can be treated individually, right? Excuse me, we have the 100. Did I answer your question, Mika? Yeah, cool, perfect, got it. So instead of 100, you can also have 100%. Now, what 100% does is it makes that image to have the same width as its container. So this image is inside this container, right? So if you remember, we've got this image inside this container, right? So when you give it 100% width, what it's doing is it's taking the width of this container, and containers will automatically change to the full width. So that's why it's changing to 100%. So just be mindful when you do CSS that if you do elements to the container and to the element in it, it will be, what it will be predominant is the CSS that you put to the specific element. Let me explain myself. That's an important principle when it comes to you doing CSS. So let me just change this to 600 pixels. So imagine, for example, that the here in I've got these titles, right? So I've got a title section, and then I've got the title and the subtitle, and I'm gonna call these main title, right? So I've got, just to recap, I've got a container at the top, and I've got one title and one subtitle. Now, here's what happens. in the title section, I'm going to remove this for a second. Okay. The title section refers to the div, right? And I'm saying I want the family font, excuse me, font family to be Arial, right? What this is saying is CSS, I want you to take the CSS division, div, and all elements inside it have to have the font Arial, okay? Now, here's what happens. If I take this now, right? Now with this class, main title, I'm targeting this specifically. And I'm saying, listen, forget what the section says. What I want you is for you to have times or yeah, I think Times New Roman or serif, I think it's called, right? Change that. You see that the font is different, right? It's not Arial. You see that this is Arial and this is not Arial. Why is that? Because the CSS overrides orders. Let me explain myself. The order in the container applies to this element. But if I apply a specific class to that element in particular, whatever class or whatever CSS I put in this element will override whatever I put in the section. That is, if I apply a style into the element, it will say, this is more important than what you told me in the container. And that's why you see that I'm targeting the same element twice, one the container and one the element in itself. And because I'm doing that, I'm telling the family to be serif, then the text is actually serif. It's clear? So that will become important because if you apply styles to containers and then specifically to elements, the styles applied to the elements typically win over what you did in the overall container. Okay? Just it's important for you to start getting acquainted with those dynamics. Okay? Any questions thus far? Hope it's clear. So our website is starting to look a bit cooler. Now, one last trick I want to show you when you embed iframes. So here we saw iframes, right? And we saw all of that information here, right? There's a lot of stuff, and that comes from YouTube. What you see here is width and height, right? You can also change those, right? This is effectively a size. So if instead of 560, I want to do 460, you'll see that the size of my video will be changed. Now that's a specific, and now it's a bit smaller, right? Now that's a specific behavior of iframes, right? For you to change the size, you would typically do it with CSS. But just so you know, if you use an iframe, you can change that with these attributes that come with it, because iframe is a bit of a special thing, okay? But typically try to do all your design with CSS, all right? Cool, so that's some of the stuff I wanted to cover. Now, just to recap, because I've given you quite a few concepts. We've talked about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Make sure you keep those three divisions, really you ground those concepts, right? Secondly, you know now how to create elements and also nest elements. Nest is nothing but putting elements inside, right? And those dynamics that we saw. I also gave you some intuition about HTML attributes and selectors, right? So how can you create IDs, classes, and so on, right? You can now embed on your website's images and video, right? As we saw. And finally, but equally important, you now know how CSS properties work to style your HTML. Now we saw some CSS properties, there are dozens and dozens of them. I'll send you a link after where you can see the full list of CSS properties. But with that, with what you've learned today, you should be able to start playing with it, right? First thing I want to say is good job. There's quite a few things that we just went through in just 1 hour. So make sure you watch this video if you need to. Obviously, we're going to have some time now for some Q&A, but just make sure that you ground those concepts, but good job, okay? Now, I've talked a lot. Now it's your turn, right? And what I mean by your turn is I would like to kindly challenge you to now take what we've learned today and put it to practice, right? How to do so? I'm going to give you some guidelines on what we could do. First thing I would ask you to do is create a CodePen account. It's free, okay? And build a website, okay? You'll need to create what's called a pen. Just create a new pen, right? A pen will give you effectively the same screen that you saw when I started coding, right? It's going to be all empty, of course. Now, build a website that represents a business. I think some mention a portfolio, some mention a personal site. So whatever that is, it doesn't really matter, okay? In that website, it has to have multiple sections, right? So logical, so that is a header, about section, video section. Just make sure that all elements are effectively inside logical divisions, all right? it all has to be organized, right? Avoid having paragraphs or titles or lists hanging and floating. Just make sure that at the end of the day, you've got dips, that is the building blocks, okay? Now, you have to have a header, a paragraph, images and videos, and a list of items, if possible, with price, right? So earlier, I only included text here, which was just plain text. Try to have something like latte coffee, say, for example, $3, right? Something like that, right? Now, if you don't create a shop, that's okay. You can also do a list of items with a price or some number, if you can, right? It's not compulsory, just if you can, all right? And last but not least, it has to be started with CSS. As I mentioned earlier, I've only shown you a handful of CSS properties, there's dozens of them. I encourage you, strongly encourage you with the link I'll send you to just go through them, experiment, break things, right? What happens is that when you build that website, don't think that your learning has stopped now in this hour. Your learning with us is going to continue, and it's going to continue in two forms. When you've got this code pen, I would like for you to share it with us. We're going to create a Slack channel and share with us the link. And I'm going to give you, me or my colleagues, we're going to give you specific feedback. So show us your website, get creative, break things, try new properties, don't worry about it. And then share it with us. And me or one of my colleagues is going to give you feedback. Hey, listen, we should do this differently, or you missed this step here, things like that. Okay, just to continue your learning, right? Now, that's the first way we're going to hold hands with you. The second way is whatever you present, try to think of it this way. In the future workshops we're going to have, I'm going to show you more about web development, specifically on JavaScript. Now, whatever JavaScript that we do, we're going to be building on top of your website, right? So the end result of today's session and what you do over the next few days is going to be the starting point for the next session, right? So it's going to be a building project that is going to span across a few weeks, right? So just put in some thought, go beyond what I've showed you today, try new CSS properties, try new HTML tags, and then share it with us for personalized feedback. Now, my colleague Ruth is going to tell you now exactly how that Slack thing is going to work. So Ruth, if you want to tell us how the team here can share with us the code pen and how will the dynamic work, please.
Thanks very much, Roger, and thanks for the workshop there. I hope everybody found it interesting, found it interactive. So yeah, just as Roger was explaining there, we don't want this to just end after this hour session. I mean, this is more just to introduce you the first, like the basics of HTML and CSS. But what we want is we want this to be a project that's going to go on for the next four different workshops. So that at the end you will have an end result. And I saw someone in the chat had said they wanted to make a flower shop for their mums. I think it was their mums, a website for their mum's flower shop. So we hope that by the end of these sessions, you will have that there so you can get it up and running and everything. And so next steps from our side here is I've recorded this video today. I'm going to upload it. And like Rod said, we've created a Slack channel. So at some point, I'll send an email to either Eventbrite or Meetup, depending on where you've signed up, and it'll have a link to this individual Slack channel, which is only for people that have attended this event, as well as a link to the video from today and any of the resources that Rog might want to add on to that. And then our idea was that by Friday next week, we will have either Rog or any of our other, we have kind of technical support mentors, assistant instructors that are on our courses. They're going to look at your code pen. So basically all you'll have to do is send your link to your code pen once it's ready and say, hey, can somebody check this out? And by Friday, they'll be able to give you some kind of individual feedback on that and just tell you on areas that maybe you can work on and things that you can improve on. And then the idea that would be the next session, as Rod said, we will still work from what you've already built and make it a little bit more interactive using JavaScript. And so eventually, hopefully, you'll have something beautiful and lovely that you can take away from the end of the sessions. So for now, there's nothing to do. Just wait for my email to come with all the information. I hope to get it to you by the end of this weekend. If not, it could be Monday once I've got everything together. But like I said, I'll send you an email with all the information and we'll go from there. And we hope to see you again in another session. Do you want to switch to the next slide as well, Rog, here? Just a little bit more information about us as well. So as Roger mentioned at the start, we're CodeUp. We're an international coding school, and so we run different courses. These are the dates for our next courses that are coming up. So we have our full stack web development, data analytics course, and our product management course. If anyone wants any extra information about this, I'll also include my email address in the email that I send out, and just feel free to we can have a quick chat together, talk over emails about our different courses. Apart from that, I think that's everything. If anyone has any questions that they're burning to ask and they really want to, also feel free to unmute your microphones. I hope I'm the one that's got the most background noise here, so I'll mute mine just now. But feel free to unmute your microphone, ask a question. If not, like I said, I'll send you this email and we'll be in touch later on.
Also, if anyone has any questions about the session or about anything in general, you know, we have a few minutes now, so I'm happy to answer any questions I can take. One thing that will be super useful is that, Ruth, I think you're going to be sharing a survey. It would be super useful if you could share with us your input. It helps us make these workshops together, so it would be lovely if you could just spend a minute just to let us know how you found this workshop. So it would be amazing if you could do that. So I think Ruth will include that link as well. Yep. She'll flick it across. So
got to mention that. So yeah, the survey link will also be there, and like Roger said, that's just really, really helpful for us because we do a lot of events throughout the year, and we always just want to improve them. So it takes 2 minutes, and it'd be really, really great to get your feedback. Somebody also just asked there about the slides. So unfortunately, we won't be sharing the slide deck how it is as Roger's presented it today, just because we can't share its property of CodeOp. But we will share, like I said, we will share the video from today's specific session, so you can pause and play it and go through it in your own time and build everything in your own time. So I think that was just the question here from Marina. Oh no, Marina also said, will you provide guidance on how to get our website to display on the web browser? That's
sorry, I didn't
there's a question from Marina saying.
Yeah, I got it. Would you provide guidance on how to get our website to display? Right. Yeah, for that, so the website we're going to build today and over the next 2 sessions is going to at the end leave in CodePen, right? Just so you see how your code effectively goes together, right? For you to show it in a website, you're going to need to deploy that website, right? If you want separately, I can give you some links on some reading you will need to do. It's not something we're going to cover because it's going to require servers and the local host and the deployment, and that's going to be involved. So what we'll show you is the code to be ready. Then, as I mentioned, Marina, we can give you some links on the next steps on how what sort of steps would you need to follow for you to be able to deploy it onto the internet. So yeah.
And I think there was also a question there just about the Slack. What is the Slack group? So if someone's not familiar with Slack, it's just basically kind of an online platform. I don't know how to describe it. A messaging platform where you can share a lot of resources. You can send instant messages. And so the link for that will be included in this email that will come out to either Eventbrite or Meetup, depending on where you signed up. If what I'm going to do, just in case anyone doesn't receive that or they have any questions, I'm just going to put my personal email address here in the chat. So that means if it gets to Monday and you say, hey Ruth, I haven't received anything yet, I can just send you all the information and the links there. Paloma has a question about HTML.
Yeah, Judy, just to your answer to your question, I think reach out to Ruth or go to our website. If you go to codeup.tech, you'll see there all the courses that we have and then the price as well. And if you've got questions on that, just reach out to Ruth because there's also some financing.
Oh yeah, here's the question about the full stack course. So sorry, just jump in here. Sorry to interrupt you. So our courses that we run at CodeUp, they're not free. We're doing at the moment we're running online courses just with the situation. COVID situation as 2020 is going. So the courses are actually, they're €4,800 to do an online full stack web development course, and that's either 11 weeks or 6 months. But like Roger said, feel free to send me an email and I can send you the links to the courses. I can send you more information about what the course is like and everything from there.
Cool. Sorry, Roger. Paloma, so to your answer, I would use deep for now. There are differences. They might be more subtle. It would be a bit harder for me to explain what's actually the difference is subtle, that's for sure. What I would suggest is for now, default to div, okay? Div is the main structure, or the main way to build containers. So use divs for now. And then as you advance, you become more advanced in web development, then you can start considering sections. Okay? Just so you know, for now, just stick to div for now, because the differences will be a bit long, a bit technical to explain the specific behavior. So just default to div for now. Cool. Any other questions on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, workshop, anything at all? We've got a few minutes in case anyone has a question.
If not, I mean, like we said, we'll be in touch. Feel free to just, on the Slack group, both Roger and I will be in it, so you can also just send us direct messages. Any questions you have, whether it's technical, don't come to me about technical questions. I'm also learning on my own, learning to code, so I'm with you in that. But definitely Roger or any of our team, you can definitely ask them. There's a question from Marina. Is this menu section the usual naming convention?
Yes, so section, that is for the class. You would see that the section names try to be quite descriptive. So you use this hyphen to divide. You would use up to even 3 or 4 words. So it could just be menu, section, mobile, or so you would use hyphens to divide. Whether it's menu section or not, that's more up to the developer, but there is a convention to use multiple words when it comes to class names, and also to divide them with hyphen. So that is a convention. Now, the actual words that you use, what happens is that when you start, if you join us, for example, in future workshops or in one of our full stack developers, and then eventually you become, after graduate, you start working in a web development, a professional environment, you're going to inherit web development stack, right? So you're going to have a lot of sections. So it will depend on the person that does define the the convention. But yeah, you would use 2 words, 3 words, even I've seen even 4 words sometimes, and all of them with a hyphen section, with a hyphen symbol. Cool. All right, so I don't know if there's anything else. If there is, just reach out on Slack. Either me or one of my colleagues will definitely get back to you. And look forward to watch out for our email, and look forward to see the code pens that you built. Pretty excited.
Yeah, we're excited to see your projects.
What's going to look like. So.